About 3 years ago, maybe a bit more, I acquired a lovely Normark Microlite, an original Microlite. This one is the original, came out with the Titan and the original Avenger, and in the same series there was the Specimen Match. Then a few years later there was the Microlite 2000, and eventually a Microlite 2, which was a 13-foot rod, and then a second version of a Microlite 2, which is a 13-foot rod, but at this point you can pull that out and put a 1-foot extension, which makes it a 14-foot rod. And I've got that last one, and that was made in China, but this is an original Japanese blank Diamuru blank, very light rod. This is only a 12-foot. Neil Maidment, whose uncle Mick owned this rod, he had 2 of these, he had 2 of the 13-foots. He did offer me the 13-foot as well, but this 12-foot was a really sweet rod. It's got a splice tip, just 12-foot, very light, very nice. But what I don't like about it, and I used this the other week, is it's got a plain, fairly slim cork handle, and you might notice something missing. When I got it, it had the old aluminium sliding rings, and I chopped those off, and I managed to put on some of these graphite rings like this, and I put them over the top there, worked them onto the rod. But because they're not exactly the right size for the cork, without taking this thicker section right down, they were loose for a while, and the Mitchell reel I was using kept falling off. It was sort of tight, it didn't feel right, it's just horrible. Now, I don't really like hacking rods about, but as you know, I've already done a few, and I'm afraid this rod, well, I say afraid, I'm going to try and make a really good job of this rod and get it with a proper screw down fitting. This time I've managed to get some with the cork top and get it so it's not too far near the top. I don't want too much handle down there, so I'm going to move it down a bit, not too far. Work out where it needs to go. That means taking this eye off here, there's a whip in there, taking that off. This is a 17mm one, and it's about 14mm there on the blank, so it shouldn't be too difficult. There's a plastic cap there that will come off. Take that whipping off, and it's a plain sort of a reddish crimson, and I've got some whipping of that colour, and then I'll varnish it up, and hopefully that will go on over there. Yeah, it's not going to have no problem at all there, and make it a far nicer rod to fish with. I think it's a super rod. It's the 2000 is the one to go for. They go for silly money in mint condition. It's not a rod I'm going to use a lot, but I think once it's behaving itself, holding a reel properly with this, as you can see when it comes supplied, I think you can see there's quite a small hole on the end. That needs to be drilled out until it's big enough for that, which is just over 14mm. So I've got a 14mm drill. I might need a 15 as well to get it right, and need a bit of care there. So wish me well, and I'm not going to take you through the entire process. I've already done that in 3 videos before, but I will show you the end result. And like I said, I just need to get this in the right place. And I think it's a fair way down there, and to hold it. And then once this is on, I will build up the cork with the sort of hump and the hood, so it's absolutely perfectly comfortable for the way I want a rod to be. I've been using those 4 rods that I've done already for a few months now. It doesn't matter which one I pick up, they all feel the same. They feel absolutely spot on, really comfortable to use. All of them have been massively improved. The blanks underlying it are unaffected, so they've all got very good blanks. Slightly different to each other, but just the job. And rods I'd already got the screw fittings on, like the Avenger 2000. I have put the hood on as well. I did have a sort of a hump on there, and I've made it into a hood, taken off the cork. It's not a difficult job to do because I'm practiced at doing it, filing it down until it's exactly right. Now, amongst the rods that Neil had, there was also an original Titan 13ft, and again it's a super rod, and I've tried to do the same with these sort of sliding rings. It's not great. I've got a second one of these screw down fittings, and I'm going to sort that one out as well at the same time, and I'll show you the result of that one. And again, the Titan is a fantastic rod. It's very different, or I say very different, it's slightly different to the Titan 2000. It's a different action, a little bit more tippy, lovely waggler rod, but it needs that reel fitting sorting out. See you in part 2. In the first part of this video, I looked at the Microlite rod and said about changing the handle, and I've now done that. It's got a nice screw fitting on it, Fuji screw fitting, 17mm, and a nice cork hood, so this goes up under there. I've taken the eye off and then put it back on again. That's whipped back on. There was a whip in there. I might replace that. That should come over there. Alright, so that needs doing. The end of the handle had that had pushed in there, so I've glued a new cork in there. The other thing I'm going to say about this rod, so that's ready to go now. Really nice, very, very comfortable. Early Normarks sometimes had spliced solid carbon tips, and this rod has also got that, and it's very, very soft tip. The middle of this rod is fairly stiff, so when you strike you get that soft tip going down, solid carbon, nice and soft. I've taken this rod, having fished with it a couple of weeks ago, I've taken this rod back to the same water, the same peg, and very similar conditions, nice southwesterly wind blowing down the pond, bit of a ripple, about 6 foot of water. Fishing the same float, which is a waggler with an insert but with a hollow tip with a scoop out of it, so it's very, very sensitive. 2 number 8s and a number 10 down the line, fine wire 20. So fishing on the drop, fishing double white maggots, spraying a few maggots out there, and now I'm confident with the reel. The reel's not falling off the handle all the time, which is what happened the first time round, and it really is nice. And because I've judged the length of the handle right, there's just a little bit past my elbow. I can cast single-handed, it picks up the line nicely. So the natural position for the reel before was slightly further up the rod, maybe a couple of inches up, but that's really nice now, just spot on. And it's actually fished a bit better than 2 weeks ago, picking up lots of small roach and now and again some better fish, which is I can show you the bend in the rod. It's a rod that I think has got limitations. It's the sort of rod that people used to use for canal fishing. Mick Maidment, the original owner of this rod, I think that's the sort of fishing he would have done with it. Fishing the Kennet and Avon Canal and little tiny canal floats. Possibly some of the close in stillwater fishing for roach and stuff like that. So it's a forgiving rod. I'd say probably the best maximum main line on it would be something like £2 Maxima quite happy to fish a £1.5 Maxima, even £1, but £1.5 or £2 Maxima. I wouldn't call it a stick float rod. You could probably fish a light stick float on it, and it's fairly tippy, but not sure that there are better rods for stick float fishing, and I prefer a 13-foot rod rather than this 12-foot rod. It's a rod I'm going to hang on to. I do like it. Not a rod I'm going to use a great deal, but nice to fish with, nice and light. I do wonder with this rod, it's a sort of in-between rod. This rod came out possibly slightly before the original Titan and Avenger rods, and there was also, not long after that, the Specimen Match, which was going the other way, a more powerful rod. Those rods, the Titan, the Avenger and the Specimen rod, have all got hollow tips. So Normark had obviously, or Diamuru, obviously mastered making a finer, softer, hollow tip rod by then. But this has got a splice in it. And I believe the Norboron rod, which predated the Titan, also had a spliced tip. So think of this as a sort of transition rod, just coming before those very special rods. The blank's a little bit thicker at this part here. We're only talking about 1 millimeter, but you'd think an ultra lightweight rod like this would have a thinner blank, not a thicker blank. It's not a heavy rod by any means, certainly very light, but there is some element of development going on here. The rod I've probably waggled a couple of times maybe is the Microlite 2000, but I've never fished with one, and I don't even think I've seen anyone fish with one, and I'm sure that's a different rod altogether. And certainly my later one, as I've said before, the 13-foot Mark II Microlite, which has got the insert, the 1-foot insert, that people don't rate that rod. It's a fantastic rod. Whether the one that didn't have the insert is slightly better, I don't know, without fishing with one. I'm going to call it a wrap at this point. I've showed you a little bit of action of fishing with this rod in its new form yesterday, getting roach. The roach goes £1, one or two skimmers, a little perch of a few ounces, lots of other roach I got there. Very forgiving rod. I did bump a few fish, but I think that's more down to the hook, and I think I need to try some different hooks. I've got the hooks. There's some Gamakatsus instead of the Drennan ones that I like. The Drennan ones are great when they're sharp, but they lose the points quickly. Told the new Acolyte hooks don't do that, but the Acolytes don't have the pattern that I want, which is a sort of fairly wide gape, very fine wire barbless hook, but without any beak points on it, or sort of that sort of curved inward curving point, or a straight point really. So until next time, it's goodbye for now.